Welcome to another edition of Time for Forgiveness, the show that not only teaches you how to forgive, but also gives you compelling guests who share their stories on how they found the path to forgiveness. Now, please welcome your hosts. Here are Kelly and Bob Pascuzzi.
Welcome back. My name is Bob Pascuzzi and Kelly Pascuzzi, and we're here with some very special friends, Terri and Mike Kern, and we welcome you guys into Time for Forgiveness.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and read your bio, Terri and Mike,
Okay.
and then we'll kind of jump and get started.
Okay.
All right. Terri Kern's life was full. She was a busy mother of 5, an avid runner, and a dedicated volunteer, an expert at managing everyone's schedule and caring for everyone's needs. She made it all look effortless. All that came to a screeching halt on the morning of April 28, 2008, when Terri, while on a run in her neighborhood, was struck by a moving vehicle and thrown 35 feet. The internal injuries and massive brain trauma Terri sustained should have killed her, but God had another plan. As miracle after miracle unfolded, it became clear that God had more in store for Terri Kern and her family. Moving Mountains is the inspiring true story of one faith-filled woman's will to live and her family's journey through suffering to joy. So again, welcome Mike and Terri to Time for Forgiveness.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
Well, as Bob was reading that and it said, God had another plan, one of it I know is to tell your story. And it takes great, as we were just talking about, this vulnerability and courage to come on and tell your story just to inspire others that maybe are experiencing not the degree that you did, but a piece of your story in some way that are suffering or feel like they're alone. I was inspired in so many ways regarding your story, but one of the things that it caught me or that was so interesting to me during the read is that it was not just your perspective. It was everyone's perspective. And I have said this on, the podcast before, that it's one event, but it's experienced very differently. But one thing that has been in our conversation, but also throughout the book that you have said, is people could look at me and say, "You're fine. You look great. Nothing's wrong." But throughout the book, you have been very, it's been a continual message that it's not the same. You are very different. You all are very different. And so I would like for you to open it based on the day of the accident and everything afterward.
Okay. I'll start this first part. We've always been pretty strong in our faith, raised the kids Catholic, and I prayed that morning before going on a run. I took the kids to school, went on a run on April 28th in the morning, and was finishing my run and was crossing a 4-lane road. And I was struck by a vehicle and thrown, like you said, 35 feet in the air. He was going about 45 miles an hour. So that happened in an instant, and I was conscious when I was hit. I actually sat up and started telling whoever found me, "You need to call my husband. This is his phone number." And so Mike got a call at work.
Yes, so it was a bit of a stressful morning already, and got a call, and it was from a number that I didn't recognize, so almost bypassed the number. And by the grace of God, I answered the phone, and there was a gentleman by the name of John. He's a pastor at a local church, and he had stopped to help, as a good Samaritan always does. And he said, your wife's been in an accident. She's conscious, and she wants to talk to you. And so Terri got on the phone. She said, they're taking me to a local hospital. I don't know which one, but, could you be there? And it kind of became a blur at that point in time. I actually was very close to the hospital, so I beat Terri to the emergency room. So I was there when the ambulance arrived, and they wheeled her in. And she was, of course, banged up pretty badly, a lot of road rash, and her face was banged up, and scrapes and blood and things of that nature. But she was conscious and very alert. And so they started the basic evaluation of seeing, what the extent of Terri's injuries might be. In the initial round of diagnosis is that, there are no broken bones that we can see. There's no internal injuries that we can see as yet, but we still need to go through a number of tests. And so I had a few moments with Terri in the emergency room, and she was great. And at that time, the police officer on scene called me out of the emergency room, and he said, "Mr. Kern, how is your wife?" And I said, "She's amazingly fine." And he looked at me with just, utter amazement. And he said, "How can that be?" And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" He said, "Your wife was struck by a vehicle." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Is the van okay?" And he said, "No, you don't understand. She was hit by a car, and she was jogging." And he told me about how she flew through the air, missed a telephone pole by a foot or so, and landed in this little strip of grass. And at that moment, everything just kind of started to fade on me. I mean, I could hear him, but I couldn't hear him. And so he said, "This is amazing. I've been in the police force for a very long time, and this just doesn't happen." And so at that point, I went back into talk with Terri, and we were talking for just a couple seconds.
And meanwhile, sorry to interrupt, but
No.
I don't remember it. I don't remember being hit by the car. I don't remember sitting up and telling the story, like to call my husband. I don't remember talking to him. I just was going into like the mom mode, pick Courtney up from, practice, and, make sure John Milton gets here, and, Hallie's in kindergarten. She's half day kindergarten. So I was just kind of going through those things.
You still had your checklist.
I had my checklist. I was going through my checklist, going through my checklist. Someone needs to get, so I was doing that.
Mike had to move.
And I
back.
didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know that I was. I mean, I can't. Like I said, I can't remember anything. But then I do remember. And then I said, "Mike, I can't feel my legs. I can't see anything now. I mean, everything went black. And then I'm like, am I paralyzed? I couldn't feel anything. And so at that point,
Terri, did this happen? Excuse me. Did this happen all at once? All of a sudden, or was this over a period of?
No, it was.
time?
It was pretty. It was when I was in the ER.
Very sudden. So you went from everything appears to be fine.
Correct.
Was the initial.
Mm-hmm.
And she had said this after your conversation with the police officer. So your
Correct.
perspective of everything had shifted as well.
And he's like,
Absolutely.
there's got to be something. You can't say that she's just going to walk away from this and not have any,
I'm in the risk management profession, so I understand risk and
Mike's
things.
going that numbers don't add up.
This doesn't make sense.
Right.
The thing that I remember that Terri said that absolutely opened the floodgates was, "Am I going to die?" And it still resonates 16 years later. Am I going to die? And I don't know how to respond to that, other than to give it to the Lord and say, everything's going to be fine. And at that moment, I bolted out of the emergency room and called the doctors in or nurses in, and they came storming in, and it was just like TV. They escort you out, they give you no information, and then you go get put in a little room and wait. And so I waited, and the only thing I could think to do was to fall on my knees. And again, I was spiritual, and I was brought up spiritual, and I had a faith base, and I've had some moments in my life where suffering took place, but nothing to this extent. But if you have that foundation, I think that foundation kicks in those moments. And so I dropped to my knees immediately and began to pray and waited. And so at that moment, I don't know how long I prayed, but a very good friend of mine, John Hillring, came to my aid and asked me if there's anything I could do. And I said, drop and pray. And so then the long wait of analysis came in. It was discovered that Terri had At that point, they didn't know what or why it happened, but they had surmised that she had strokes in her brain, that she was having a series, and in total it was 6 strokes, of which a number of them were quite large. And so this was a very regional hospital with very good capabilities, but they weren't a Trauma 1 hospital. And she all of a sudden became Trauma 1 very quickly. And I had to make the choice to move her or not move her. Either or could have not been a good positive outcome. But again, being in the risk management side, I weighed the odds and said, I think that the right move is to move her. But it wasn't me, if that makes any sense. It was
Felt guided.
definitely guided through the whole process.
Because that wasn't just one move and one decision that
Right.
you'd have to make.
No.
There was multiple.
Maybe several, yeah.
It started a series of, it almost, in a lot of these situations, this is going to sound maybe a little trite, but you got to laugh a little bit. Mm-hmm. Because if all you're doing is crying and being fearful and angry, God struggles to get through that door. And so we almost started to laugh a little bit because it seemed like over the next 3 or 4 weeks, we need to do this procedure, or we need to move her here or move her there. She may die in the process. I mean, that was the only thing I remembered in the doctors or nurses or whoever. The end of it was she may die in the process.
And meanwhile, we don't have any family in the Kansas City area, so he's having to get on the phone with my family who live all over and his family and ask them to come because it was pretty grim.
It went from everything seems like it's okay to she may die very quickly. And so, much to the credit of both our families who are from Oregon and Kentucky and Idaho and Utah,
Yeah.
they got on planes, trains, and automobiles and got here as quickly as they could, and they really became our community, along with friends that are in the book, doctors that stepped out of nowhere to help. So it was beautiful to see.
But go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. That's fine. Go ahead.
No.
I was just going to ask Terri if she could kind of summarize the extent of your injuries, like.
Okay, the extent of my injuries, well, as Mike said, both carotid arteries were bilateral dissection, and those arteries are responsible for perfusing blood to the brain. So
about 90% of the blood to the brain.
yeah. So I was a runner, and so I had really low blood pressure, which is usually a good thing. But in this case, having low blood pressure when you don't have much blood being perfused to your brain is not a good thing. So those were compromised. So there's no blood flow. There's limited blood flow to the brain stem and to perfuse the brain. And then, so they were really focused on that because the strokes is blood was going up there, they clotted, and then they, hit my brain, and that's how the strokes happened. So they didn't know really what to do. So I was at this one hospital, and they just kept kind of evaluating me, and I don't remember it, but apparently I was awake.
Yeah, so I mean, if you could think about a straw, that's your vertebral arteries. You have them on both sides of your neck, and when they are dissected, they're either pinched to the point where there is absolutely no blood flow, and that shuts off all blood to your brain, and things don't work out very well. Hers were severely dissected to the point where they went from a straw size down to a thread size. And so there was trickles of blood getting through, but the biggest problem was it was creating embolisms on the side, and so blood was clotting, and it was starting to flick clots into her brain as it clotted.
And so, I didn't realize this until later, that when you have a stroke, there's both areas of your brain that are affected. And so those areas are dead forever. Those will never be healed or regenerated. But the brain can find new pathways to kind of figure out how to do things. Yeah. So those areas on both sides of my brain, which Mike said pretty significant from the CAT scan, were dead. And they explained it to us. It's like when your grass is dying, when you don't water your grass, you don't see immediately that it's dead. But over time, you see, you know, and then, so this was all in my brain. So they were most focused on getting that figured out.
Yeah, so the problem became, and this was another one of those life or death type scenarios, and that is, we need to thin her blood and push her blood pressure in order to try and get as much blood to the brain as we possibly can. There's an artery in the back, a vertebral artery, that actually kicks in if the carotids become compromised, and that's generally what happened, but there still wasn't enough blood perfusing the stem. And so at that particular point in time, they said, if we thin the blood and push her blood pressure, she has internal bleeding, she has hematomas, she's got all kinds of internal problems that we can see. It may kill her if we thin her blood and
She
push
may
the
bleed
blood
out.
pressure. She may bleed out.
Wow.
Because they wanted to thin the blood and increase the blood pressure so they could get as much blood to my brain as possible as quickly as they could. And so I was hit on a Monday, and by Wednesday, third hospital that he's moved me to, I'm just going to say Dr. Paul Camerata, which was my neurosurgeon who pretty much saved my life. He was brought in, and that was his idea, was to thin my blood and increase the blood pressure. And apparently Mike asked him, what would you do if it was your wife? You know, he said, I'd save her brain. I mean, if you can't save her brain, you know, but again, it might. So Mike describes it as like a garden hose. You know, you thin the blood, increase the blood pressure, and I'm allergic to the heparin. So now you've got a garden hose with all these, so they're trying to fix that.
Yeah, they had to go in and surgically repair the hematomas and plug all the holes and things of that nature while she was having reactions to the transfusions, and it was a pretty chaotic few days. And then ultimately they kind of put her into a coma-like state, so that when you stabilize somebody with a brain injury like that, you put them into a coma state in order for the brain to settle down and swelling to come down and things of that nature, so that it can begin to heal.
So, based on what Dr. Camerata said, so that was Wednesday morning, early in the morning, and all the family was in town, and the kids were at the house, and they got woken up, I don't know, like 2 a.m. or something, because you moved me at night.
Yeah, so we went from the second hospital, which again, the second hospital was a teaching hospital, and it was a situation where Dr. Camerata did not have privileges there. You said that Dr. Camerata saved your life, and I totally agree with you, but he would say if he
With
was
the help
here,
of God, yes.
God was with him the entire step of the way. He's a very faith-filled man. Anyway, he said, if you can transfer her to my hospital, I will take complete control of the entire process, of which, one more time, the doctors and nurses were saying, if you move her, she will die. And so I, again, did the risk reward, made the decision that Dr.
I mean, the weight of these decisions, like,
Yes.
these aren't small decisions.
No.
Like, these are big decisions, life-changing.
I can only tell you that let go and let him do his work. And there was a moment at the second hospital where, again, this is kind of the comical side, there's no privacy. So there's a little wardrobe closet where you can hang your coat. I remember physically going and sticking my head into the closet and closing the door as hard as I could. And I just had, I don't know how long with him, but he said, follow me, follow my plan, and I will guide you through this.
No, it's very powerful. Terri, going back to the accident itself, you were catapulted 35 feet in the air. You landed on a patch of grass, in other words, or something like that. Is that why they attributed that there were no broken bones? Because that seems very bizarre, right?
I guess so, yeah, because it's a 4-lane road. Yeah,
But still,
patch
with
of
the
grass,
impact, I'm shocked that there weren't any broken
Well,
bones.
and later they discovered, like way later, when I got out of my coma and I finally put weight on, I'm like, my knee really hurts. And they're like, oh,
So
we
she
forgot
had-
to check the other parts of your body.
Oh, yeah.
Where the
lower
bumper hit her
extremities.
knee, they tore
I would-
the ACL,
I would-
MCL.
ACL,
okay.
MCL. So that
Yeah,
was,
you would
but
expect
it was
that
too
then.
late to fix that, because they were just focused on
Sure,
the brain.
saving your life.
Right,
but-
right.
So this driver, can we pivot a little bit? Can you explain, because my understanding, you said it in the book, was it was a no-fault accident. Like, can you, how does that all transpire?
There wasn't a crosswalk. I had just, I ran that a million times and there wasn't a crosswalk. I looked both ways and started making my way across, and then got to the median, and then looked again, and I saw, I think I saw one car, and she looked like she was going to let me go. But then the driver, apparently, this is what we heard from him, because, like I said, I don't remember it. So we have witnesses, like the driver and the lady, that he saw her slow down, so he was trying to avoid hitting the car. So he swerved, and he swerved right into me. So he was apparently not speeding. There was no,
Distractions.
drugs or
Negligence
alcohol,
on his
negligence
part.
on
That's what they
his
term it.
part. It was, and in Kansas, there's a thing called a no fault accident. No one was at fault.
Right.
Just
It just happened.
yeah, it just happened.
Right.
So that's kind of what Mike was more focused on. He really needed to understand what happened. I was just focused on, learning how to walk again. That never really, I was angry, frustrated, felt guilty.
But I remember in your book, you said I was never angry at him.
No.
I was angry at the situation of life.
Right.
Of what had changed and how
Right.
I had changed.
Right. I was angry at the situation that we were put in, that the whole family was put in. And then also I felt guilty for, running, not being more careful. And then also I felt frustrated and tried to replay, like, gosh, if I had only left like a minute later, if I had only done a different run, because I had all these different runs that I used to do, and if I had only, it was the Deer Creek run, so I ran through the golf course or whatever, but I would replay that over and over and over again. And then, and then I thought, well, maybe it's not as bad as they're saying it is. Because I'm laying there when we're jumping ahead, and forgive me, but Mike, to his credit, he was told by the doctors and everybody that, you need to remind Terri what happened, because we don't know the extent of what she's going to remember, because her strokes were on both sides. We're not sure she's going to remember her family. We're not sure what she remembers. So I'm not talking. I've got a trach. I've got a ventilator, a feeding tube. I'm hooked up to all these machines. And so he comes in like every day. You were jogging, you were hit by a car, you had suffered brain injuries, and I laid there and I'm like, oh my gosh, if he comes in one more time and tells me this, because I'm replaying things in my head. Like, I can talk to myself, but I can't talk to anybody else.
Verbally, yeah.
So, I was thinking, well, maybe he's blowing it out of proportion. Maybe he's just being a little dramatic, thinking I'm sore because, I've been hit, but what does he mean? I can't walk. What do you mean? I know how to walk. So I had thought that maybe he was making too big of a,
It's the perspective's kind of interesting, and we tried to capture that in the book a little bit, and that is, everybody has that unique perspective. And so Terri's perspective of the accident is moments a number of moments before, and then 25 days later or 30 days later.
Right.
My perspective is moments before, it was just a normal morning, and then this unbelievable ride through, life and death over and over and over again. And so I think it's important to understand that there's a lot of people that are affected. The parents are affected, and siblings are affected.
Oh yeah,
and a
whole
lot of
family.
the children were affected. I mean, I to this day continue to have some regrets on the way in which I handled my fatherly duties to the kids, because they were 6 through 16 and there were 5 of them, and that was just a very impressionable age. And if you read the book, you'll kind of get a varying degree as to how people turned towards it and embraced it, and others turned away from it and did not embrace it. They became somewhat angry, and to a certain extent to this day, there's still a little of that apprehension that has taken place. Our prayer is that our kids and whoever reads the book sees that suffering is a part of life, and there can be beautiful joy that comes from it.
I think it's important, like you're saying too, that in the book you had said an error is like that the children were the same and they'd experience the situation the same. And as we're all aware that like suffering and grief and loss, it's a very individual experience, and everybody experiences it very differently. One of the things that I was paying attention to that just caught my attention is there was quite a span where Terri was not in the home.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like you said, 5 kids, and your parents are there, and they're doing the best that they can do, and life has to go on. But that was not easy for any of you.
No, I mean, it was a lot of adjustments, but man, it's beautiful when people kind of put their own needs on the back burner a little bit and just kind of try to be in the moment and really focus in on a central theme, and that was getting Terri well. Giving her a bunch of support, and then getting her back home in some way, shape, or form. So that was our common goal throughout the entire family and the community. I mean, I can't say enough about the community. People came out of nowhere, and I know oftentimes you hear these things, but it's just amazing to witness. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, his sister started a caring bridge, and then we had prayers said at church and neighborhoods. I mean, people that we didn't even know.
People just rallying around you that you don't even know.
We're praying. Yeah.
The human spirit coming together. That's
Yes,
pretty
for sure.
cool.
Yeah.
Your book is entitled Discovering Joy Through Suffering. And for those who haven't read the book, how would you put that in context, if you can, in terms of how did you find the joy in the suffering?
I think through the suffering, the joy was found in being appreciative for the present moment, looking at life differently, in the sense that, you're so rushed to do this and do that, and looking at life as, this could be the end. Everyone has a story to tell. Everyone's going through something. And so the joy in the fact that I was saved too, was my life was spared, and then I got to enjoy the kids, because there was a point when early in the book when I felt like I was going to die, and I was actually at peace with that, and I wanted to. I mean, I wanted to go. And for a long time, I didn't tell Mike that, because I thought, gosh, what kind of person would leave their whole family and be happy about that? So I was really kind of looking forward to it. A sense of peace and came over me. But then when it was very clear that wasn't God's plan, then I fought to get back. And, I thought the joy that we found through seeing how other people, like you said, Bob, step up, and humanity, you get so much negative. People are not good. People helped other people.
Sure.
And you're unlearning humility, I think, was the main thing that I learned
Humility,
from that
yeah.
too.
I guess I would say that of all the things I've experienced in almost 60 years of life, and this is going to sound a little bit strange at first, but bear with me, intense suffering gives you intensity of purpose as to what it is you are supposed to be doing on this earth. And so through that intense suffering, if you think about it, winning the Super Bowl is a lot of fun, and having things go well, getting a new car, doing all the things that you want to do, that is really fun. Mm-hmm. And there is some joy to it, but that intense focus and suffering gives you that moment to truly understand what it is the plan is for you in this life. And once you come out of that intense suffering and you give it time, and it could be a moment or it could be 15 or 16 years, you see the plan, and it is beautiful, and it is it is truly joy-filled just to see how God has used this experience to walk down this path. I mean, 16 years later, we're talking about our faith and all that we gleaned from this experience. It's been beautiful.
I just want to say, you also experienced your own intense suffering with your own health issues. Mm-hmm. And as we're talking about purpose, do you see that was purposeful or necessary so you were going to be able to attend to Terri in a way that maybe you would have not been able to prior to your own suffering? It
was a workout. It was the prelude to the big show. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I ended that letter because I wrote him a letter about it, because we did see God's hand throughout his whole back and diverticulitis and all that. And I ended the letter in, I don't think this journey's over, and then 2 months later, I'm hit by the car. So through suffering, like he said, also draws you closer to Christ. I mean, it just, because really everything was stripped away from me. Everything. I mean, I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk, I couldn't feed myself, I couldn't do anything. But I could pray and I could feel close to Jesus. I mean, that's the only thing that was not taken away from me, to be honest.
It was really your ability to still think. Mm-hmm. And that allowed you to do that. I mean, think in a way that drew you closer to your relationship with God. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that was a blessing, right?
That was a huge blessing.
Yeah, it was a blessing. Even though your extremities, you had no control over anything.
Right.
But you still had that.
Right. And Mike would come. I mean, I would have my rosary on my stomach, and I would just rub the beads and the crucifix. I couldn't even really remember a lot of the prayers, but I knew, you know what I mean? I knew that they were there. Yeah, sure. I knew, yeah.
And so you guys, obviously the podcast is about forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And so I want to kind of pivot us that way, if I can, here for a minute. In what ways, we'll start with you, Terri, maybe, that you mentioned there was a certain guilt on yourself. And so how do you perceive forgiveness right now in terms of everything you've gone through? Is that something that you even feel like you need to, is that something you've thought about, or do you feel like that's not really an element in this accident?
I mean, it definitely was. I felt guilty for putting our family through this. I mean, I really did. I think I said, I'm sorry, and it helped me, though, because I used to just hold on to things and hold on to things and hold on to things. And then Mike is really good at, you can't go back. You can't undo it. Sure. We only move forward. We can only move forward. And we can take what we learned about how we feel and just move forward and don't make the same mistakes I had nothing to feel guilty about, really. It was an accident. We all make mistakes. So, but then I really felt, and Mike can speak to that too, but I really wanted to meet the driver just because I thought, I wonder how he's feeling, because he remembers the accident, I'm sure. I don't remember getting hit. And Mike kept thinking, is she going to one day remember? Are we going to have to move because it was right, in front of our neighborhood? So I really kind of wanted to meet him and just offer him forgiveness and see how he's doing.
I found so many things powerful, and because there's a specific chapter just for forgiveness, and one of the sentences was the desire for forgiveness was for us. And we talk about this, in these conversations, that it really is a selfish act because it's really about you.
Yeah.
But then sometimes we aren't aware of the impact it has when someone hears those words, I forgive you. And it just, it actually brought tears in my eyes when I was reading and understanding that he was a newly father that really wasn't able to step in and enjoy that role because of the weight of what he felt that had happened.
There was times throughout the whole healing process where he would come to my mind, and there was never really like an anger that I ever felt, but it was always a pang to say, we really need to meet this person just to better understand again what happened, but then also just to see how he's doing. And when we walked into that room in the library and he started talking about his child and the fact that he couldn't necessarily bond with them because of this accident and the weight that was lifted from him, I mean, that was incredibly powerful for both Terry and I. And
attorneys were not favorable. I mean, they did not want us to do this. They're like, no, you don't need to meet him. You shouldn't do this because and
it was just that moment. It was just that moment. We haven't met him or talked to him or have seen him since. It was just that moment in time that was needed, to your point.
I don't remember even what he looks like. If I saw him walking down the street, I would have no idea, because it wasn't that important, like what he what he looked like.
That.
Yeah, it wasn't about him.
Right. But at the same time, even though you haven't had any conversations with him, I'm sure that grace that you both extended him, that had to impact him in a positive way.
And it impacted us too. I mean, to your point, forgiveness can be a bit of a selfish part, but if I understand the Bible correctly, we need to have complete forgiveness before we get to enter heaven. So,
well, it is an act of self-compassion. Mm-hmm. That's what you're extending to yourselves when you do that. So,
I wanted just to comment on a couple things, and then I'll pass it back. But I, just reading the thoughts of your children, and they were all very different. One had said that this tragedy brought our family closer, but one that really caught my attention was, I know it helps my mom every day to come with her light to cope. I need the glasses. With her life as it is now, and to embrace the cross she has been given. I often wonder why my mom survived when someone else in a similar situation may not have made it. I don't know the answer to the question, but pondering it has given me a different perspective on life and its meaning. Mm-hmm. I just sat with that for a while. Yeah.
The kids, it's interesting because we didn't have an idea to do it this way, the book. But we knew that we needed to write a book just because there were so many people that God put in Mike's life and in my life and in our kids, and there were so many miracles, and we just knew that we had to at least get it down on paper and write a book. And so I started to try and write a book. Well, I've got a brain injury, and I'm a brain injury survivor, and I was never a writer. So I don't know why I thought I could just sit down at the computer and write a book. So I kept struggling. Kept struggling. And then Mike very patiently just said, hey, why don't we think about hiring a ghostwriter to help us? Yeah. And so, we interviewed a couple and found Tina Wendling, who's phenomenal. And then Mike said, you know what, if we're going to use a ghostwriter, why don't we do ours and then have her interview the kids, separately, so they wouldn't be influenced by what the other one said. So, and then have other family members or the doctors, and so we can give the different perspectives like you talked about. And so I thought, oh, that's a great idea. So we reached out we talked to the kids, and a couple of the kids, I mean, they all said, yeah, we'll do it. But they said, you know what, you may not like what we want to say. Or you might not want to hear what we'd like to say. And we're like, you know what, just be honest. That's all we ask is be honest. And, with Tina, and so they were, and they're brutally honest in it, to the point to where I was reading, I'm like, can we change this, Tina? She's like, nope, promised your kids that we would keep it the way it is. So, but it did affect the kids, and it's interesting because it still affects them because I am different. And so it's, people just, like you said in the beginning, people, or one of you, you look at me and think, okay, well, you're doing fine. I mean, I'll have people say, are you back to 100%? Are you back to, I'm like, no, so I am different. And the people that know me the best, my husband and my children, know the difference. They know what I used to be like. In fact, humor. Mike said, I feel like I'm having an affair with another woman, but it's like you. And I'm like, oh, do you like this other person? So you have to actually find humor in it because, what else is there? But, yeah, I'm rambling.
You're not rambling at all. I just have found it very inspiring because, you said something when we first started. Our lives changed in an instant. So did ours, and so do many others. And one of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast is moving pain to purpose. And the purpose was not so much in the tragedy that we experienced, it was in what we did next. And it's very meaningful to be able to put your grief into something that can influence and impact and inspire others. And I believe that's what you're doing right here.
Yeah.
Well, which you both have, and we're very appreciative of that as well. I mean, that takes a lot of courage and strength, and it's just something that is a gift, and you need to think of it that way. You continue to give a gift.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And it is, like you said in the beginning, I mean, we're all going to experience suffering. Some of it is, like, traumatic, but you cannot make it through life without some kind of suffering, whether it's minor or big, or it's big for you. The breakup with your boyfriend, that might be tragic at 16, and that's suffering. So everybody's going to experience suffering, and we know that. And so how you deal with it and how you approach it and make it into a purposeful lesson for yourself and for others, and witness to other people, because people are watching you.
They are.
How are they going to handle this?
That's
How are
right.
they going to handle this?
So, Terri and Mike, what's next for you guys? What's the next?
What's next? Well, we just went through marrying off our son, which was thank you, fourth wedding. And then we graduated our fifth child, Hallie, from college, and now we're anxiously awaiting our second grandchild to be born here in the next 4 or 5 days.
Yes, we're just waiting for the phone call. In fact, I said, don't call during this time, unless you're in labor.
That's
so
exciting.
anyway,
You have to jump on a plane.
Yeah, I'll jump in a plane. Yep.
And
yep.
where we?
Atlanta.
Atlanta, right.
And interestingly enough, we do have a special needs granddaughter.
Oh.
And it's her brain too, cerebral palsy, and so it's interesting. It's our daughter's old. I mean, our oldest daughter, but it's interesting how God prepares you. I mean, God prepares you, for this. I mean, mine's a brain injury, hers is a brain thing. So, and Caitlin's watching that, and it's interesting. So we're present to her and helpful.
Wow, in a very big way, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to wrap by saying that your story of faith and courage and resilience is very inspiring.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you guys, as you guys said, because you could have not done the book, right? We found out kind of the hard way that it's easier said than done. You stayed with it, you got it done, and now it's inspiring other people. So kudos to you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're excited to see where things go for you from here.
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon because we just self-published. We didn't
So
have
it's
it.
on Amazon.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And again, the book is entitled Moving Mountains, Discovering Joy Through Suffering. Again, this has been Terri and Mike Kern. Thank you guys so much for being on Time for Forgiveness.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Bob Pascuzzi for Kelly Pascuzzi and Sean Parr. We'll see you on the next episode of Time for Forgiveness.
Thank you so much for listening and for watching Time for Forgiveness. Hey, listen, visit our website at timeforforgiveness.org. And here's the great news. You can now download our workbook. Just click on the QR code. It's that simple. You can also message us on our website because we read every single message, and we certainly love to help. You can also reach us on our socials on Instagram and Facebook, and you can email us, again, at info@timeforforgiveness.org. I'm Sean Parr for Bob and Kelly Pascuzzi. We'll see you next time on Time for Forgiveness.